built a Budgetel, changed flags to the Baymont flag, and recently switched to the Clarion flag, which is part of the Choice Hotel Group. And till recently, they didn't require food service, but now they're asking food service, and we would like to be compliant.
Sure.
It's limited food service. It's sandwiches and hamburgers and pizza and those things.
All the things that people want.
All the things that people want when they come in after a day. So.
Understand. Anything else? All right. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much for
Thank
being in our
you.
community. And that will bring to conclusion the Farragut Beer Board, June 27, 2013, and we knocked that out in a whopping 6 minutes.
And in 3 minutes, we'll start the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting.
We're just having bucket loads of downtime here today, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, when I don't travel, I with the record. The minute that I do, that's what these whole travels. The one here does. Gosh, everywhere I go. Entryways and steps and down, food bars.
Unless you make it later, have a plow back in.
It's become very more so than ever.
Same stuff you sent out, David, we had earlier in the email, so this is just a version of it. Yeah, okay, all right, nothing new in there besides what you already sent out with the.
Gave that to us last week. Just wanted to make sure y'all had a copy of it.
Okay, okay. You have to figure out how to print off some of that stuff, and I think it kind of cuts off the margin inside right in the center.
Oh, really? Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. I'm sure there's a brilliant way to do that. I have no clue how, but you know, that's
I use Outlook, Microsoft Outlook, but if you're using like Gmail or some other Yahoo or something like that, I'm sure the screen's a little different.
Hey, this flood insurance deal, that's,
it usually does. It usually cuts off the margin.
that's a
inside.
big
Write it
change.
in, it's not a big
It's
deal.
going to put a choke on a lot of folks.
Yeah, I think we got some buildings that are going to be technically underwater,
Mm-hmm.
like the old millwork building down there below Putt Putt.
Look, how many, I mean, I've never seen that thing operate very well down here. Did it operate very well?
Yeah, it was open for a long time. I bought doors and windows there. Then it was a furniture store.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, for several years.
It's too bad that
sitting there empty for a long time.
Yeah, 'cause it's a big building, good news is it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, but nonetheless, it's a big building. So.
Not if it's around the edges, to put some kind of curving.
To my knowledge, it's never flooded.
All right, it's 7 o'clock, and this is now the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting for July the 27th, 2013. We'll start by rising for a moment of silent prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the list is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have a burning need to change the agenda?
I'll make a motion we approve the agenda as written.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next item is the mayor's report, and I can report that 3 of us went to the TML, Tennessee Municipal League annual meeting in Memphis over the weekend and a couple of more days. And these meetings are always a good place to share stories with others doing the same things in different towns. And we always tend to learn something good, and so they're worthwhile. Also, under Mayor's report, we're going to hear a year-end summary by Chris Woodstra from AmeriCorps. Are you ready? Go to the podium.
Hey guys, I'm Jason Scott. I'm the Town of Farragut Stormwater Coordinator, and Chris has worked with me all year, and I was going to give him a little introduction before he started. So first off, AmeriCorps is a national service program engaging people from every segment of our great nation in meaningful service in disaster response and recovery, economic development, education, healthy futures, veterans and military families, and environmental stewardships like our Stormwater Matters program here at the town. Service to something greater than ourselves makes us stronger. It makes our community stronger, and it's the spirit of AmeriCorps service. Chris Woodstra came to Knoxville last August to spend the next year of his life in a place foreign to him, to make a difference in the environment and health of a community he had never seen, to help people he had never met. Through his efforts, Chris has enhanced our Adopt a Stream program, helped take Earthfest to a new level, walked miles of stream, monitoring for pollutants, and working with our Young Sustainability program to enhance our internal recycling processes. Chris came to Farragut as an idealistic stranger and now intends to stay in the Knoxville area as part of our community and as part of our family. Very quickly, in addition, I'd like to make note that Brian Blackman and John Harris with the CAC are both here. They're the coordinators of the 40-person AmeriCorps program in this region, of which Chris is a part, and they're responsible for applying for the federal grant that allows them to be here. In addition, I'd also like to make note of 2 water quality team members from Knox County that Chris has worked with a lot this year that have also committed to a year of service, and it's also coming to an end for them. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank them, and John and Brian and Chris. We're all different, but we all have something to offer the world around us, and as long as we have well-intentioned, passionate, and hardworking people to give of themselves, the spirit of service will soldier on, and our communities will be better for it. So I present to you Chris Woodstra, our 2012-2013 AmeriCorps service member. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Hello, everyone. As most of you know, I'm the Town of Farragut's AmeriCorps member this year. You might have seen me walking around most of the year in ripped jeans and a t-shirt, so I figured I'd redeem myself for the next 10 minutes and look nice for you guys. With that said, this is my end-of-the-year presentation. During my past 11 months, been in a program called AmeriCorps. In August of 2012, I came down here from Michigan to join the CAC AmeriCorps program. I basically needed some time in my life to figure out what I wanted to do. I just graduated college, and I didn't really know. I was trying to find myself. I was trying to find my direction, so I figured I'd give AmeriCorps a shot. AmeriCorps is basically an 11-month program. It does different community service projects, and our program is environmentally related, so I was delegated to be out here with Jason as a water quality assistant. I have to be completely honest, I didn't know what to expect. There was a moment at the beginning of the year where I kind of looked at myself and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I want to do this, but over the course of this year, slowly, I've changed my mind, and AmeriCorps become one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The first thing I did down here as a volunteer event was this Pail for Clean Water event. It's the first time I got to spend a lot of time with Jason, and we basically paddled down the river like for 5 miles, and we dressed up in costumes. I was a kangaroo, and he was a skeleton. But, I mean, we were trying to catch people's attention. We wanted to get them to vote for Jason's photo in the AmeriCorps National Photo Contest, so there was a purpose behind it. And speaking of the photo, this is the photo that Jason entered in the contest. Jason and Josh took this photo last year, and the whole theme behind it was water related. So the quote was, "Water pollution is hazardous to river unicorns," and we campaigned aggressively for this thing. We tried to get people to vote for it, talked to everyone we could, and when it was all said and done, it ended up getting 1,310 votes, over 2,000 likes on Facebook, and it beat out 256 submissions to win first place. So we were super happy about that. And then the prize money. You might be asking, where did that go? Jason chose to give Hardin Valley's outdoor classroom $500, but the remaining money, as most of you probably know and are involved in, went to the outdoor classroom that's in progress now in Farragut. So initially, Josh last year was supposed to work on this. Things got delayed a little bit. Then I was supposed to work on it this year. Didn't get too much of an opportunity to do that. I think now that this thing's finally getting underway, Gwen, the new AmeriCorps member next year, is going to be able to have the opportunity to work on this. So right now I'm basically organizing service projects so that Gwen can transition easier, and on its inauguration there can be like a nice event for everyone to come out and do something on that day. And like you guys probably already know, that's the location of it, right adjacent to Farragut High School. And then probably the biggest project that I'm involved in out here in Farragut is the Adopt a Stream program. I spent a lot of time on that this year, going out into the community, recruiting, talking to people. Over the past 11 months, I managed to get 6 new businesses to adopt streams here in Farragut. I got the Rotary Club of Farragut, the local business Massage by Tara Banakas, State Farm, Quick Gym Knoxville, Master Custom Home Remodeling, and the Sedgefield Homeowners Association. It was really cool. These people were really receptive. I kind of pitched it to them like, hey, you guys can come out for a few hours twice a year, do a cleanup, help out the community, and in return you'll get a sign near one of the roadways. So they were super eager to get out there, and it was pretty cool to see that. One of the other big events that I was involved in was the Town of Farragut Waste Audit with our Sustainability Coordinator, Lori Sal. At the beginning of the year, this is probably hands down the grossest thing I've ever been a part of. I actually had to jump in that dumpster outside this town hall and kind of dig through the trash and bring it into the community room. So we basically sifted through it, found out what was recyclable, what was not, like what were people doing, were they recycling, what were they recycling. And all of this went in an effort to improve our recycling program. So as a result, we got a lot of information about the people out here in Farragut and what their recycling habits are. So that was really, really beneficial. And like I said, I do the town's recycling here. You probably see me walking around. To date, I have so far recycled 2,282.8 pounds of recyclable material that's diverted from a landfill. And as you look at the picture, you probably notice some familiar faces, except for Oscar the Grouch. And then probably the single-handedly biggest thing that I've been involved in thus far in AmeriCorps was Earthfest. Earthfest is a massive event, celebrates different environmental things. It was at Pellissippi Community College, and I think more than 8,000 people showed up this year. So it was an awesome event. I was happy to be a part of it. And me and Jason actually got a chance to be on the Channel 10 News, which is a weird/awesome opportunity because I was wearing a dollar bill costume and he was wearing a huge crayfish costume. So we represented our Enviro characters pretty well, and we gave the pitch to try and get people to come out. And as you can see, Mayor McGill, there you are, taking a picture with a few of our Enviro characters. So we were pretty happy about that. All 3 mayors participated, and we really enjoyed that because it just showed our public figures, we're supporting what we do. And speaking of Enviro characters, we had 12 of us in AmeriCorps that dressed up as different characters and basically taught the younger generation a little bit about environmental events. And that was super successful like it was last year, so we're happy about that. And then finally, Jason and I shot a rap video over in the community room here that basically depicted a lot of the information that we have talked about in Earthfest and stuff like that, so that was a lot of fun. Some of the other things I did this year was dry weather screening and GPS inlet mapping. Josh, last year's AmeriCorps member, his huge project was to GPS map all the storm drains here in Farragut, and he did an awesome job with that, but unfortunately some of his data got lost, and I had to basically go back and GPS a lot of those things to help out our stormwater department. And then dry weather screening, it was actually really significant to me because I was walking, just doing a stream walk, just marking outfalls and stuff, and I came across a green discharge and talked to Jason about it and noted it, documented, took pictures, and ended up being like a gas discharge into the end of the stream. So TDAT came out, they monitored it, and they're going to look after that site for a while now. So I think that's just a staple of how awesome it is that just an ordinary citizen can go out there, notice something, report it, and basically help our community get better and help our streams get better. And concluding, thank you. Thank you, engineering department, first and foremost, because I spent the most time with you guys. Lori Sell, Scott Brewer, Chris Jenkins, Greg Norman, Daryl Smith, Parks and Leisure, they were awesome. Community development, administration, public works. And as you might see, someone here is missing. That person would be Miss Teresa Lawson. Teresa, I appreciate the laughs that you gave me this year. There was never a dull moment in our office. You always managed to put somebody in our office in a good mood, so I appreciate that more than you know. Thank you.
We're sure glad you have fun.
I'm trying. That's all I was trying to do this year. I did do some productive things, though, believe it or not. And then lastly, and most importantly, Jason Scott. The things that Jason's done for me this year, they can't even be put into words. I've learned so much more than he probably knows about professional things, personal things, and just everything that he's taught me this year has been super valuable, and I appreciate that more than I can state right now. I'm thankful for the opportunity to work with Jason, and I honestly don't think I could have a better supervisor. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, did I understand? Did I understand correctly that you have decided to stay here?
Yeah, I have.
So you defected from Michigan?
Couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. My family and I defected from Michigan 35 years ago.
I could work for it.
We're glad to have you. Thanks for what you did this year.
Yeah, congratulations on that Water Unicorn Award, and thank you for donating some of that money back to the town. That was, I'm sure it would have been nice to have had a few pizzas out of that or something.
They probably did.
Mayor, I just wanted to say, too, that I know Jason Scott does a tremendous job as our stormwater coordinator doing our stormwater program. And, we do just excellent work in that field and with the AmeriCorps program especially. And his touch as being an AmeriCorps member as well growing up, I think that's been a tremendous asset for us. And I can't thank him enough as well. So, and Chris as well for all the hard work you did this year. Thank you so much. We wish you all the best.
Next item is Citizens Forum. Do we have anybody signed up?
I do not.
Nope. Then the next is approval of minutes from June 13th.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Okay.
Then business items. First one is approval of resolution R-2013-04, the FY 2014 fee schedule.
Mayor, I'll take this one.
All right.
Each and every year we adopt a fee schedule that comprises all of our fees that we have within the town of Farragut. This year, most of our fees we are recommending all stay the same. There are a few that I wanted to go through with you that we did not have in the fee schedule last year or that are increasing from where they were last year. First would be in community development. We added a grand opening events ordinance this year for businesses. And so with that, we included a security deposit for the sign and also an application fee that should be presented for special events and things like that. So both of those have been included in this fee resolution. Also in Parks and Leisure Services, the community room fee, which has not been increased in over 13 years, it's currently $10 per hour, $15 with the kitchen. We're proposing that increase to $20 per hour, $30 with the kitchen. Field use fee for our new artificial turf field when that gets put in place. We're recommending that increase from the regular fee of $15 per hour to $30 per hour. Also, softball fees, we're recommending those increase from $300 to $325 per team. And also that the volleyball fees increase from $135 to $165 per team. Be happy to try to answer any questions, and we would recommend approval of this fee resolution.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is appointment of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen member to the Planning Commission. This is something that Ron Honkin has been doing, and he tells me he's willing to continue. So I'd like to nominate Ron Honkin for that spot.
I will second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is appointment to the Personnel Committee for a one-year term.
Yes, sir. At the June 13th meeting, the board approved a slate of applicants for the various town committees. There was a vacancy in the Personnel Committee for a one-year appointment. Mr. Drew Carson applied for the Parks and Athletics Council as well as the Personnel Committee, and he has agreed to volunteer for both of the committees. Staff recommends approval of the appointment of Drew Carson to a one-year appointment on the Personnel Committee.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Next item is consideration of a letter of intent to purchase property at 11401 Kingston Pike. Now, those of you who were curious enough probably realize by now that that is the Russell property, which includes the house. This has been something that we've been working on for quite a while, and basically Tom Hale, our attorney, has been in charge of that process, and so I'm going to let him speak about what this letter of intent is and how we got to this point.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll give a little bit of background here. As this body knows, historically the town has annually appropriated funds, which it puts in a land acquisition fund for the purpose of buying land for town uses. This practice has enabled the town over the years to acquire all of the facilities that we have, from the place where we're sitting to the Fretch Road Public Works facility, to the greenways, to the many parks that we have. It's a tribute to the foresight of the elected officials that they have saved up money over the years to put themselves in a position, the town in a position to do this. Before you tonight for consideration is the possible use of some of the money in the land acquisition fund. For a number of years, the staff in particular, as well as the elected officials, have been intrigued by the idea of trying to preserve for some town use the Russell Avery House, which is at the corner of Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road, not 2 blocks from here. The house is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and is one, if not the oldest structure in the town of Farragut. In recent years, this body, as the mayor mentioned, has been talking about this project, and it's been on the town's strategic plan for the last several years. It has a fairly prominent place in the priorities of the town and has been treated in that way for several years. Staff has been studying this possibility for at least, to my knowledge, since 2009. I think in the very beginning, Gary Palmer was looking at it for the purpose of considering moving the house from its current location and putting it on property owned by the town, renovating it and using it for some purpose. That possibility sort of stalled, I think primarily because there was some concern about the ability of the house to withstand a move of that kind. In 2011, there wasn't a whole lot of activity on this, but it just kept coming up. So it came up again in the middle of 2012. There started surfacing some thought about, well, maybe we could buy the property as a whole and subdivide off part of it and then sell that part for commercial use. At that time, I think the Russell family that owns the property was asking a fairly substantial price for the property. I can't say it was an excessive price given the prominent location of the property, but it was a fairly significant price. And the thought was that we should really gain a lot more information about this property before we entered into a transaction of that kind. And there were some feelings that we needed to understand the condition of the structure, what it would cost to renovate it, whether there were any barriers to development like setback problems or access problems, things of that nature. So in September of last year, the board authorized me to sort of head up a review of the property, due diligence review, to try to make sure that we understood everything we needed to know about the property to try to use it for some good purpose. After I was authorized to do this, I did what every smart lawyer does. I went and found an expert to help figure out how to analyze this interesting project, and asked Jim Nixon, who most of you probably know, who has been involved in commercial development around here for a long time. He's interested in the town's activities, and Jim volunteered to help gather the information and help analyze the information just between he and I and Mr. Smoke to try to figure out whether this was something that made a lot of sense to do. We looked at a number of reports that the Russell family made available to us. They had surveys, they had a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental study, they had geotechnical studies of the underground, they had some concept plans, had an asbestos survey, had a fuel tank removal. I mean, there was a lot of information to review. We got some of our own information, and we're going to talk about that just in a few minutes, but we had a title report done. A number of concept plans have been developed to try to help us figure out how exactly the property could be used. We've had an expert restoration architect look at the cost of what it would take to renovate the facilities. Mr. Sparkman is here. I see him back there. And he'll be helping us with some of the discussion here in a moment. But I would like at this time to ask Jim Nixon if he would make a few remarks about some of his thoughts on this project and some of what we did. And Jim, you need to give your name and address. I'll tell you that so the mayor doesn't have to.
Jim Nixon. I am home address, your office address, or what?
Either one.
255 North Peters Road, Knoxville. Happy to be back after some period of absence, but I have stood a long time, a few times at this podium. But anyway, when I was asked to get involved in September, I'm happy to be involved in it, and from everything I've looked at, it's been exciting. It's been really good, the things we've looked at. Today I have Annette Hommel, who is with Site Incorporated here. And Site has done a number of engineering layouts, site plans, and investigations engineering-wise on the property. Frank Sparkman is here, and he has the historical significance. He has a lot of history on the house. He has a lot of information that he could talk an hour, he can talk 5 minutes, depending upon how late you guys want to stay here. And when I got involved, I was asked to evaluate options and provide answers. Nobody wanted to address this and say, well, we'd like to buy it. Nobody knew what we could do with it or what it would cost to do that with it. And the way I started out was Mayor McGill and I had a conversation, and his conversation went something like, I don't think we're interested if we can't preserve and save the home. Moving it, we looked at that. Moving it's going to be very difficult, very expensive, and guess what? It was going to lose its registration if we moved it. Now, we might have been able to gather that back again, reapply and so forth, but losing the historical designation was pretty significant. And considering the condition of the property, we determined that moving it was probably not a possibility, probably not an option, despite the fact that I don't think the Russells were willing to give it to you anyway. So we started out with the supposition that we would leave the home there and that we would protect it and save it and renovate it if possible. So I worked closely at all times with Tom Hale and David Smoke, and in cooperation with the mayor. At no time did I spend a dime of your money without their approval in advance. So we signed no contracts with anybody. Mr. Sparkman and the site people are working by the hour. When we tell them to do something, they do it, and that's what they charge for. And they're both within the budgets that we pre-established, and Tom Hale has those agreements. I investigated keeping the house and selling off an outlot. That would require a subdivision. I also investigated keeping the house and keeping the dairy barn. Some people call that the doggy daycare center. It used to be your town hall. I don't know what that is now, but subdividing presented quite a few problems, and I'll talk about those in a moment. And we also looked at removing the home and developing the property, which was something that no one wanted to consider. And we did look at what the property would hold, and we did that in order to determine some evaluations. I met individually, David Smoke and I individually, with each of you, and briefed you so that you would be kept up to speed on what we were doing as we were doing it. And I know David has had additional conversations with each of you so that this presentation would not be just cold, but that you would understand what we were trying to accomplish and why we were trying to accomplish it. I have attended meetings with the Russell representatives, and Arthur Seymour is here tonight, and he is the attorney for the Russells. And I also attended several discussions and and negotiations, if you want to call it that, with Harry Thayer, who is the agent for the Russells. I'm here. I'm not getting paid by the town of Farragut. I'm trying to help the town of Farragut. It's an unusual response for me to be here in that condition, but I enjoy it, and I've had a good time doing it. So here are the answers to what some of the main questions are. Can we move the house? Yes, we can move it. If we could get it. I don't think we can get it without purchasing the property. And so moving it was disqualified from our thought process early on. Losing the designation would not be advantageous, I don't think, to have a home sitting back here. You might be able to use it, but it wouldn't have the historical significance that it has where it sits right now. Second, subdividing, you've got nearly 2.1 acres. The town of Farragut requires a 1 acre minimum. Subdividing 2.1 acres with the house on one of those is very, very difficult. And we went through a number of layouts. I think each one of you have seen those layouts, have seen what we tried to accomplish, and those are available at some point if you want to look at them. But in order to keep the home on a 1 acre lot, the rest of it would have to be an L-shaped property. It was not suitable for development that we could determine as a subdivision. The subdivision would require setbacks and entrances and exits for each property to stand on its own, and we thought that the property should stand as one in order to be utilized to its highest and maximum use. As each of you know, the property is bound by a lot of traffic, and there's been failed businesses at the other three corners. Not just one or two or three, but many failed businesses at the other corners. And it's hard to get in and out of, and difficult to expect a very high value for that type of situation. Even though it's so prominent, it's actually hard to develop, very difficult to develop. So our recommendation was to leave it all as one and to discount a subdivision of the property. If the town purchases it and does not subdivide it, there would be an area that the town could provide an additional building. I mean, you could leave the barn there. I don't think that's a good alternative, but there would be plenty of land there to put an additional building. And some of you had options and ideas about what would go in that building, and that could be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road as you needed facilities or needed additional property. So without any further discussion from me, I'm going to start with Frank, and he's going to tell you guys about the historical significance. Frank and I have toured the building in detail. He can tell you some about the condition of it, and I'd also like for him to address preliminarily the estimates that we have from him about saving it and renovating it. Frank Sparkman.
Thank you, Jim. First of all, if I may, I'd like to leave some qualifications. And David, are you the right person?
Sure.
Sorry, I don't have copies for everybody. You don't want to really read them anyhow. But they're available. I appreciate what Jim has done. Unfortunately, I'm not able to work as affordably as he does, but we hope we've been efficient in this process anyhow. I want to commend all of you for even considering what you're talking about tonight, because where a lot of communities are discarding their heritage and their historical artifacts, you have a great opportunity in my mind. And it's not just the Avery Russell House, which is important. It's a 178-year-old building. And as I understand it from the bit of history I've read, David Campbell actually built a fort there in 1787. I don't know what happened before that, but at least for 226 years, that site has been an important place in the history of Farragut. And so when I look at the site as a preservation architect, and I am, among other things, we have been doing preservation work really since 1972. And I don't know exactly how many projects we've done, a number of houses, a lot of different kinds of buildings. But when I look at a building, I look at not just the way it is now, which has problems. I mean, it needs work. There are things that need to be, in my opinion, removed from the building that are inappropriate additions. But what I see is a restored building that helps recreate the sense of place that existed there at least from 1835. My understanding of the history of the Avery Russell House is that originally, when it was built in 1835, it was built as an inn, and there are still vestiges of the use as an inn. The fact that it has a 4.5 foot wide front door is pretty unusual for a house. But there are marks in the building that indicate that it had elements that were part of an inn, a bar, and storage rooms on one side, and a dining area on the other. The upstairs apparently had a ballroom that has been subdivided when it became a residence in around 1853. So it has a history itself. It has a very interesting history, and regardless of if you decide to acquire it and restore it, it has a lot of possibilities for amplifying what you talk about in your strategic plan as a guiding principle to recognize Farragut's historic character. And it's probably the most prominent visible site in this town that would reflect that history. So it's more than the house. It's the site itself that has been a part of your history for at least 226 years. So when I look at the building, I think, well, it has some problems. It has some additions that need to be removed. It has some deterioration that needs to be fixed. But basically, it has good bones. It's still a sound structure. That's not to say it won't have some structural work required. It needs a new roof, and that when you put a new roof on it and you're trying to recall the history of this place, of that building, it would need to become a wood shingle roof, because that's how they were built then. So there are a lot of changes that need to happen, and there are some things that will have to be done to make it usable under the current codes. However, because it is on the National Register, it will be exempt, or can be exempt if you desire it to be, from some current code requirements. We're working on a project in Elizabethton, Tennessee right now, an circa 1815 building. It's a state-owned property, and it is to be used as a house museum. And so we've taken it through the fire marshal's office initially, and I should introduce my colleagues to you, Suzanne Taravella and Andrew Godwin. Suzanne actually took the project to the state fire marshal and confirmed what we did and didn't have to do. The bottom line there is it means money. However, in our assessment of the project and in the numbers that we gave, we assumed kind of a worst case situation in terms of having to bring it up to code. So do you all have our estimate?
Yes, they do.
Okay, then a lot of what you see in there, I expect we won't have to do. That doesn't, if you decide not to. For example, we had assumed we might have to, if it was to be used as a public facility, a meeting facility, it might have to be sprinklered. I don't think that's the case. Part of this will depend on how you use it. But if it is to be a house museum, that sort of thing, I don't think you have to do. You'll find other ways to spend the money. I don't mean that it'll be any less, but so part of it is getting clear about what you want to do with it, how it'll be occupied, and that will have, in the end, will have an impact on what the true cost is. So what I would say to you is you have a potentially valuable resource to meet your the goals of your strategic plan. And I think it's really a wonderful example of early 1800s architecture. There are a few in this county and surrounding areas, but not a lot, and not many as visible as this. So as a disinterested citizen, I would encourage you to seriously consider maintaining that part of your history. Do you have any questions that I can answer for you?
Frank, I've got a bunch, and the first one is, first of all, I want to thank you for being involved in this project. I know your qualifications, and I'm very happy to see you. It gives me a great deal of confidence to see you involved in it. What do we know about how this house looked when it was built? Do we have period photographs? Do we have something to go by to?
I do not. The photographs in the National Register nomination are pretty much as it is today, because most of the additions that were done to it were from the 40s, 50s. But what we know is that traditionally this building would have been just what you see from the street, without the additions, without the back porch. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward Federalist style building. The one detail that I have an opinion on that I would like to do some more research on is the entrance porch. I know what's there is not original. My guess is it didn't have a pitched roof on that porch, just looking at the way it meets the building. So that whole issue of what was it originally will take a little more digging, and as in the project we're doing in Elizabethton, where there's so much that we don't know, we're getting all the clues we can. At some point we have to make our best guess at what it was really like. But this is a pretty straightforward building, so not a lot of guesswork in terms of what it was, the way it was built originally.
Now, I understand that there was a colonnaded front porch, a very large prominent front porch with some massive columns, which I understand were taken and sold and used on another house in the area. Do you know anything about that?
I've read that, and I don't know where they went or whether that was even the original porch. I question it. It's possible. But part of this whole process is really looking under the microscope, trying to see if there are clues. This is detective work to try to figure out what was there. And sometimes you can get hints from what may have been attached to that shows up on the brickwork.
And I've seen some signs that there was something broader attached there. What about the chimneys? There were chimneys on that house a few years ago that disappeared after the hailstorm. Do we know where the brick went from them?
No, I don't. What I do know, though, and I've done this on other projects where materials are missing, we can recreate those with similar materials. You can't go to the brickyard and get them. You have to go to the right brickyard to have them made.
Yeah. Well, we still got the same dirt around here. It's probably we can.
Well, we've had handmade brick made from a company over in North Carolina, and really that's the only one in this area that I know of. But that's part of what makes this business interesting, is to figure out how to fit the pieces of the puzzle together.
Sure. And you've been, I've never been inside the building, and I'm dying to get in there and poke around a little bit and see what we've got. What type of ceilings do we have? We have 9-foot ceilings, 10-foot ceilings?
No, I think they're, if I remember right, and Suzanne helped me on this, they're 11 on the ground floor. Yeah. And I don't remember the exact dimensions, but 11 ground, 10 top floor, something like that. It actually is in pretty good condition just to look at. There are some places where there's some plaster deterioration, but it looks like it could be lived in without a whole lot of effort.
Excellent. And so it is we can determine the original floor plan fairly easily.
I think so.
And the roof structure, you say it has good bones. The structure is intact and sound.
Everything we've seen. Now, it's been over 6 months, I guess, since we've been in there. And I don't know if it's had any leaking since then, but at that time...
The roof, pretty new.
Yeah, there's nothing scary about it.
Excellent. The windows. Of course, we don't know what the original windows look like. What would we look at replacing them with? I know we have to be historically correct, but we don't want a maintenance headache either. So,
Well, you don't. But if you really walk the walk, you know, the rule in preservation work is you don't throw anything away that was original. That is repairable. And when you replace it with original material and design. It's another one of those specialties. It's not actually, doors and windows are not any kind of extraordinary specialty. There are only a number of companies who do the true divided lights with the weight and pulley sashes and the stile and rail doors and that sort of thing. But you know, all of that is doable, and I think it's doable within the budget that we created.
okay, and the windows that are there, do you think they're the original windows or anything like the original windows?
I think they may be like the original windows, and I can't remember for sure whether they're 9/6s or 6/6s. In this period, they could have been one of several patterns. But what I'd really like to find, and we weren't tasked with doing the kind of in-depth historical research that I would want to do as a part of the project, is to see if there is any documentation on what this house was like, whether it's a narrative or there are drawings or paintings that someone may have done in the late 1800s even. We've worked on one project, actually the old Roane County Courthouse. It was built in 1858, and that building was built from a narrative. They wrote a specification which described the dimensions, described the materials, described the way it was put together. Whether there's something like that for this house, you know, who knows? But that's a part of the process, to get as deeply into the history as possible. There may be people in the community that have some of that. If not, then we just have to go to the sources, and there are some locally, like the McClung room at the Customs House, that has a lot of information. It just takes time to dig that out.
Well, I'm excited to see this moving to this point because, as has been stated, I think it's probably one of the most historically significant buildings in Knox County, and it is on the Fragile 15 list, I think, Knox Heritage.
Right.
It's to be able to acquire this for the town and make it a part of our a part of the town's experience. I just see it as a phenomenal opportunity, and I'm excited about being able to move forward with this. I'm glad to see you associated with it because I know your capabilities. So,
well, I appreciate that. And I want to reinforce another thing that Jim said. If you moved it, it would lose its register capability, in my opinion. I was on the Tennessee Historical Commission State Review Board for 11 years, and that's what we did, was look at National Register nominations, or in some cases, delisting buildings. And one of the reasons they get delisted is the site, they're not on their original site. So they've lost the sense of authenticity. That's what you have, not just with the building, but with that piece of dirt. And I think it deserves an archaeological study at some point to see if there are other, either artifacts or indications of where other buildings may have been. I know it's been disturbed, but there may still be some evidence there. And because of its importance, it deserves that kind of effort. It's not just a renovation project.
absolutely. I see one of the major challenges that I see, and I think it's very unfortunate that that Kingston Pike has been pushed up so close to the front of this, and that's why I originally, when I heard that the property had been acquired by an entity that was planning on putting a bank there, as I recall. Of course, the house is going to be demolished or moved, and I saw we had the opportunity to get it. I thought it would be great to have it on a place where it could have a expansive front yard and a nice approach and all that. How do you see, or have you thought about at this point, some way to enhance? I mean, we got so little to work with in the front yard there. How can we make that really? What can we do with that? Any ideas?
Shrink Kingston Pike. But, I mean, Yeah. I don't know that there's any realistic way to give it more front yard, but in my mind, that's not the issue. The issue is, can you create a historic context around the house by removing the distracting factors? Now, I will say that I'm not completely convinced that that building behind shouldn't be retained, or some portion of it, because I don't know its history in entirety. What I see is there's an earlier building buried in that whole block, and I don't know how early it is, but it may be part of the history. So that's a piece of investigation that ought at least be considered. You may in the end say it's not worth it, doesn't contribute, but as we went through this process and talked about the what ifs, one of the things we talked about was how could you recreate or recall some elements that would have been on that site. And I don't know what they were, but you certainly know there were other buildings there which could be useful for functional purposes, but also could help recreate the setting. And a lot of that may just be pure landscaping and getting the modern day world away from the building a little bit, reconfiguring the parking so it doesn't encroach on the building so much.
What do we know about the stone wall, its origin? Or
I do not. Again, this was more about, at least what I think my charge was, to look at the condition of the building and, is it salvageable? If so, of course it is. At what cost? But I'm dying to get into those kinds of questions.
Me too. Thank you.
Good.
I think one of the things we were trying to do is look at all the possibilities for the site. And of course, as Mr. Sparkman has noted, there's the house itself and all the possibilities that surround that and the possibilities of this property or this building behind. But one of the other things that we were looking at, and I would like to ask maybe Mr. Nixon and Ms. Hummel if they could address this a little bit, but there was review of the possibility of the use of the rest of the property. Property within 2 blocks of Town Hall is getting a little bit scarce, and this is a pretty prominent piece of land, and there has been study done of how the rest of the site could be used for town purposes in the future. We're getting a little tight in this building here, and at some point we're going to need to, I think, have some more facilities somewhere. But Mr. Nixon, do you want to address that a little bit?
One of the things we looked at was, as I said earlier, whether the property could be subdivided, and we determined that really made no sense to try to subdivide it. But from a municipal standpoint, if you wanted to put something there that had the look and the feel and the appearance of the restored historical residence, there is an area that you could put that. And I think we show an 8,000 square foot building there. It could be 10,000 or it could be 6,000 or so forth. It could configure this way or that way. There's different configurations. But in order to accomplish that, we needed to have better entrances and better exits. So we have gone on 3 or 4 occasions, I can't remember exactly what, we've met with White Realty. White Realty owns property on all sides of this. They own to the west and they own to the north. We have been able to work out, in theory, I guess, in a handshake situation with them, a shared entrance over to Campbell Station Road and a shared entrance onto Kingston Pike and an entrance into their shopping center for overflow parking or additional parking if we ever needed it for a meeting or a event. And furthermore, White has agreed to a shared property where half of the road would be on them and half of the road would be on the town property if they acquired it. and therefore enhancing the town's property by not having to take all of the roadway out of the town's property. And in return for that, the town would construct those facilities and White Realty would have the use of them. Everybody that we've talked to in the legal and engineering professions have said that that is a good deal for both parties. White Realty would have some benefit and the town would have some tremendous benefit with these shared driveways. White, it was determined, probably could not get additional entrances on either Kingston Pike or Campbell Station Road, but that a shared entrance and exit on both of those would probably be better for both parties. So there is room for an additional building without subdividing, owned by the town or constructed by the town, and some of you had ideas. I know Jeff had some ideas and Ron had some ideas about what that might be used for. Currently, you don't have enough room for your museum. You certainly could move your museum over there into another facility. You're currently renting space up here to Knox County. You could move them over there. There are lots of visitor center would go over there, and that would be a really appropriate place for a visitor center. So there are thoughts that in the future the town facility here could be greatly enhanced by removing from here the uses that are currently not town related. So that would certainly be a better place for the Folklife Museum because it's more visible and has more exposure there than it would here, and would then free up space within the town hall. And I understand that you are crowded here, so it would certainly be a way to solve some of those problems. Is that the?
That's it. Yeah, that's exactly the thought, and it's just another possibility. It's land that is available that can be used for town purposes.
We need to get Annette's firm to get us some points and some basic designs of these facilities, and if this comes about like the letter of intent that I've seen, we'll have 60 days to go meet with White Realty and get that part of it buttoned up, and we would do that then and bring that back to the town. All we have right now is a handshake with them. They're pretty good folks, and Ralph and David and I met with them out in Las Vegas at the ICSC convention for about an hour and a half meeting, and they were extremely cooperative.
Well, as you can tell, a lot has been learned over the last 7 or 8 months.
I've been on it since September.
Project. Yeah, and one of the things I think that we learned as we were going through this process is that given the realistic uses of this particular piece of property, it was likely that the asking price for the property was not something that would be doable for the owners within the foreseeable future, given property values. The original, when all this got started, I think the asking price was about $1.8 million.
At one point, they were asking over $2 million.
That was before we were involved, I think, but. Mm-hmm. But at some point during the process, the asking price came down to $1.5 million.
It was offered to the town at $1.5 million.
Yeah, and we continued to work on the looking at the various limitations and the things that could be done with the property, and we finally, I think, got to a point where we now have a letter of intent that we understand that the Russells are willing to sign, that would be the foundation for a contract which would allow the town to purchase, secure the property for $1,250,000. That price would be paid $500,000 at a closing, which wouldn't take place for 90 days probably, and the balance of $750,000 would be payable in 3 installments over 3 years at interest of 1.5%.
1.5%.
So we'd spread out. What the beauty of that is that, and David will talk about that in a minute, or about this in a minute, but it allows the usual budgetary process of putting back land acquisition money to fund the acquisition at a very reasonable interest rate. So essentially, that's I guess the other details of the letter of intent are we'd have 30 days to get a contract in place.
Mm-hmm.
That contract would be allow us a 60-day due diligence period where we would have an opportunity to clean up all other loose ends, reach all other agreements we needed to with White Realty. And
yeah, it's a free look.
Like
you get your
that.
money back if you don't take it.
And if we don't, when we put down, I think $50,000 when we sign the contract, which we get back if we decide not to go forward with
For any reason.
for any reason. So that's essentially, and the letter of intent also has standard provisions in it that would also be included in the contract. So that's kind of where we are, and I think Mr. Smoke was going to talk some about the budgetary issues.
Are there any questions from me before he starts that?
I did have one, well, actually I have several, but one in particular. You had mentioned, Jim, and first of all, thank you for your time and effort on this. Appreciate your expertise. You had mentioned that this intersection has been problematic from a commercial development point over the last few years. What, in your opinion, makes it good for this use but not as good for regular commercial development that you'd normally see at a busy intersection like this?
Well, we've made arrangements to fix some of the access problems with our arrangement with White Realty. And a commercial enterprise has a lot different aspects to it than a civic enterprise. For instance, business comes and goes differently out of a municipal facility than it does out of a commercial or retail facility. Traffic flows differently. Parking is much different. In municipal uses, you have nobody here, or you have a lot here, and people come and go differently. So this would not have the value as a retail user because, very frankly, getting a lot of people on and off that site would be difficult quickly. So somebody that goes in there to get a sandwich or at a Burger King or a Subway or something is different than somebody that comes in here to renew a license plate. And so this exposure and visibility to a visitor center or to a folklife museum makes a whole lot more sense to me than a commercial enterprise on that site. A commercial enterprise on that site, in my opinion, would require that the home be knocked down and maybe even combined with White in order to make a viable facility for commercial use.
So just having the house museum concept alone, in your opinion, would not be an appropriate use for this facility or this site?
I think it is an appropriate use, but you're going to have additional property that will be usable at some point for the community. If let's see if I can say this the right way, trying to make this a commercial enterprise, like I told Ralph within 30 days after I started, is just the wrong idea. Trying to put a commercial facility next to your historical facility, the two just don't mix. And in order to get a commercial facility on there, who wants to go into a renovated home and 30 feet out the side door you've got a commercial building, or a Hardee's or a Wendy's or something? I'm not against those, but they don't mix. So a strictly municipal use, you can control what else goes on it, and you can control how it's developed, and you can control the accesses and the ingresses a lot better, and therefore make the historical renovation part of it really something that the town could be proud of.
For a municipal use, would you consider this price a fair price?
It's on the high side of fair. I mean, we can go over to Turkey Creek and I can show you some $1 million an acre property. How do you compare it? It's 2 blocks away. This is 2.1 acres and it's $1,250,000. I don't know where you can go up and down Kingston Pike and find another piece of property for that price of that size. You couldn't.
I had a question for Mr. Sparkman. I don't know if I could ask that right now. Question on a lot has been said about historic designation. I'm just curious, what exactly is that? I mean, I'm not sure. How does one apply for it? How long has it been in place on this house? And what criteria are there used beyond just an old house? I mean, what else is there to it?
Good question. This was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1975. And in order to be listed on the register, you're one of several things. You're significant for architecture, or for events, or for persons. This building, and I have the nomination, you probably have seen it before. In 75, they were a lot skimpier than what we do today, so the description was pretty brief. But the focus is on the building itself. It talks a little bit about the history, which I find equally interesting and really more important, quite honestly. So when you talk about uses, I know you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to tell you anyhow. I think it would be a terrible loss if the community lost the historic character of this place because of what happened there over the last 200 years. So that's my soapbox speech. But back to the National Register listing, it happens because someone, and it can be an individual or it can be this body or someone in your community, nominating the property to the National Register. And the process is that it goes to the Tennessee Historical Commission first in Nashville, to their staff. They review it, make a recommendation to the board that I was on. That board reviews it, and if we approve it, we send it up to the national keeper of the register. They have the final say-so. And once they approve it, then it is listed. And when you look on the internet under the National Register of Historic Places, a lot of the properties are now digitized, so they're all on there. Used to, you had to get paper copies, so they're beginning to put them all up there. But it means that it's recognized as an important piece of the history, either locally, regionally, or nationally. This, in my mind, has at least regional connotations. And that has to do partly with the fact that this building was used, and apparently there may have been an earlier inn. There's no clear documentation I've seen so far. But because Kingston Pike was the way before the railroads came along, this was an important part of the transportation network that linked East Tennessee to Middle Tennessee and back up to the north. So the site has tremendous significance. And even though I think it was listed primarily for architecture, it's also significant for events and people. And if we were listing it today, I think we would have listed it clearly for all of those. So I don't know if that answered what you asked me.
Is there any Civil War application for that
Yes.
house?
Yes.
I've heard people reference it, but again, I'm not familiar with.
Apparently, and according to the nomination, it was used as a field hospital during the Burnside fight and Longstreet conflict. For at least 4 days, it was a field hospital, and there are still vestiges of bullet holes within the building. So it was important as a part of that time in this area. And because of its age, you know that it was built prior to the Civil War. It was used during the Civil War, so it's a tangible reminder of what went on in this community. And I think it's a great teaching tool for your children.
I was fascinated with the phrase house museum, and I think we all have an impression of what that might be, but I was curious what your definition of that would be. The restoration as a house museum would be
to recreate the feel of that place when it was lived in by a family, a farm family in this case. And that's why I think there are other outbuildings that might be recreated if we could determine what those were. But the house itself, the ones that I'm familiar with, the one that we're working on in Elizabethton right now, is simply that. It is a recreation of what it was as a home at that time. Now, some mix the use as a house museum and other things, and I've worked on a number here in town. The Mabry Hazen House is a historic house, but it is used for other functions, and a lot of these encourage other functions to help pay for themselves, quite frankly. I'm on the board out at the Ramsey House, and we have one of the most significant houses in this area, 1797 building that's in pretty pristine condition, and it is furnished like it was with some of the original furniture from the Ramseys. So it's a wonderful experience to go in there and enjoy that period in time. I think this site has more potential than that, quite frankly, as not just a house, or it could be the combination of restoring it either as an inn or as a house, but also having some exhibitry that recalls its whole history. That's what's fascinating to me. It's not one point in time. It's part of this 200 plus years.
Are there any furnishings that are available from the original?
Not that I know of. And I won't say that because it's a big family and they may be out there. We need to ask. In the case of the Ramsey House, for example, they started in 1952, and it goes on that we're still looking for other pieces to.
Frank, there's a basement under the house, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
And that's the original basement?
We believe it is, and it was used as both a kitchen and apparently as slave quarters. It's not just an unfinished basement. It had plaster ceilings and walls and cooking facilities.
What height ceilings are in the basement?
Pretty low, actually. They're,
like
I don't know.
7 foot?
No, it's more than that. It's closer to 8 feet. But obviously not seen as an important space, just a service space. Anything else?
Thank you.
Mayor and Board, if I could walk you through a little bit on, we've talked a lot about the history of the site, about all the different things we've looked at in order to make this a viable project. Of course, one of the biggest issues we're going to have is being able to fund the project and make sure we have enough funding available to do this, as well as other projects that the board has said is part of your priority list. Before you, we looked at the CIP, and this is timely since we do have second reading of our budget tonight. You could, if you elect to purchase the home and agree on the letter of intent, you could also agree to to approve this amended and alternate CIP that you have before you. What this shows is two separate line items regarding the Russell House. One is the actual purchase of the home, and that purchase, as Mr. Hale indicated earlier, is to put down $500,000 immediately, $250,000 annually over the next 3 years at 1.5% interest. That total price would come out to $1,272,500. The other costs that we have are the site improvements, and obviously we've used Mr. Sparkman's numbers to look at many of these items. Site Inc. has also given us some numbers regarding the road work that needs to be done throughout that area. And our projections are to immediately go in and renovate the home, to hire an architect, to demo some of the areas that need to be demoed, and if you indeed wanted to demo the barn in the back, the dairy barn in the back, the first year estimated cost is $750,000 in FY14. Then you have in FY15 $300,000 to buy furniture that would be period piece furniture for the home. Certainly if we can't find any that maybe the family has or something like that, maybe any donations that we may be able to fund as well. But do that, and also to set up parking correctly in that area behind the home as well. And the third year for the $300,000 is also to move the entrances, add the sidewalks for the walking areas throughout the site, and any other site-related work that, and especially landscaping, that we may need to get accomplished to really beautify the site. So overall, we're looking at $1.35 million in site improvements and restoration improvements to this Russell House area. So total projected cost would be a little over $2.6 million over the next 4 years to renovate this property. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions if I can, but certainly these numbers are going to be somewhat movable. They may move out if things take a little longer to get done than we anticipate. If we are able to get any donations and things like that, certainly that could lower the numbers down some. But I think anytime you're dealing with historic properties, you never know what you're going to run into. And I've dealt with a few in the past, and certainly those things do happen. So I think we're trying to be pretty conservative in these numbers and trying to hopefully not have to come back and tell you we're going to need more money in the future for some of these things.
What I noticed, it looks like this is, we've gone back to pushing the McPhee Park Phase 3 construction back in order to help pay for this. And I guess I'm personally kind of disappointed to see that. Is there not any other way around this?
No, sir. The biggest impact to your CIP over the next 5 years is that if you do purchase the home, even if we do pay for it over a 4-year period, it still impacts McPhee Park. We originally have McPhee Park for design in 2015 and construction in 2016. That does force the park to be moved out to 2016 and 2017. The only way to have that park move up, I believe, would be one of two things. One is you take out some projects that you already have in the CIP and reallocate that funding to the McPhee Park funding, or you could issue bonds to pay for that project and get it done sooner. What you'll see also in the revenue side of the CIP is we are allocating land acquisition reserves over the next 4 years as well for not only the purchase of the home, but also in FY 17, you're also allocating $1.5 million in land acquisition funds to help renovate and get McPhee Park done.
Okay, David, back up to the prior screen. I see we have $500,000 a year for land acquisition. That's not impacted by this purchase, is it?
We will continue to put $500,000 a year into the land acquisition fund of the CIP. It's all in the CIP.
Okay.
But what we're doing is allocating those dollars straight into paying for the Russell House over those years. So, for instance, FY14. We're going to put $500,000 in the land acquisition fund. You're going to pay $500,000 for the home, so it's basically a wash. No additional dollars going into that fund in this next CIP year. In FY15, you're going to put $500,000 in. You're going to pay $261,250. So you'll have roughly $240,000 to put into the land acquisition fund. Flip to the next screen. If you look at the bottom of your page down here that Allison's just forwarded to on the CIP reserves, you actually can see how the land acquisition fund changes over the next 5 years. Right now, we've got $1.9 million in the fund. That would remain for FY14. You'll impact it a little bit over the next 2 years, and then again, as I mentioned, we have $2.1 million coming out of the land acquisition fund in FY17 to help pay for McPhee Park. And that is going to drop the land acquisition fund down to $800,000 at that time if everything stays the same as it is right now in the CIP, which certainly things do change over the next few years. Of course, we've also talked about the assumptions in the CIP that we will continue to be able to put $2 million a year in from the general fund into the CIP. That assumes revenues remain the same. We continue to have that gap between our revenues and our expenditures, and that we can do that. Of course, if we have additional revenues, we may be able to push McPhee Park up, but we just don't know that yet. And that's another alternative, is if we get enough revenue that we have not anticipated yet, then certainly that may be another opportunity to move the park up.
Okay, thank you. I think the park's going to be there. This is this house and stabilizing it are a lot more urgent. And I think it's a prudent shift in priorities there to what we've projected here.
I do agree with Alderman Elliott. I wish we could keep the park moving on pace, but I have to agree with Alderman Markley as well. You know, this is the opportunity for us to buy the home. I do need to state, if you know, this conversation has taken place you know, throughout our community for several years, and just on an individual basis, for the longest time I said, I just don't know what you're going to do with that house. I mean, sitting right where it is. But I really appreciated the patience and the guidance and information. I had an opportunity. David was kind enough to arrange an opportunity for me to go through the home. Using your terms, there is good bones there. I was actually surprised the good shape it was in, and I went through I've been through the whole thing, and then the layout that Jim has put here tonight really sold me on it when I had the opportunity to look at that a few months ago. 9 months ago, I would have really struggled with this decision. I do not struggle with it tonight, and I think it is something we need to do.
Well, I think everybody here can agree that this has been a very thorough process, and due diligence was done in every possible way. We owe Jim Nixon a big debt because he did it all for free. Of course, we work for free too.
I'm getting paid what you're getting paid.
But this may not be the end of the fiscal situation, because there are grants available. We hope to get some help from Knox Heritage, who is represented here tonight by Annette Brune. Do you have anything you want to say?
I'm Annette Brunn, 232 Bel Air, Farragut, and the president of Knox Heritage Board of Directors. I just want to say thank you. I mean, this is a wonderful opportunity for the town of Farragut to really sort of step into its own with a marquee property right at the corner of a very busy intersection, surely, but certainly in a prominent place with good visibility. I think it'll do a lot for the community in many respects. I also think it'll sort of heighten the reputation of the town of Farragut sort of back into a place that people respect and appreciate. And it also keeps the balance, I think, of new buildings and architecture with old historic homes and character. And I'm just thrilled and excited. And Knox Heritage is prepared to help the town in any way we can with tax credits or grants or whatever to make sure this property stays and whatever it ends up being. So.
Well, yeah, we need to meet soon.
Yes, absolutely.
And,
let us know.
Start talking about grants or whatever. But in addition, I think I want to organize a fundraising campaign using grants or benefactors or whatever, by whatever means. I think we ought to set a goal of raising $1 million, and I'll be happy to lead that effort, but we'll need a lot of help from a lot of people. We have a fellow here who is very astute in terms of raising money, because that's what he does for Covenant Health, right? Okay. So look for more details on that, and I guess we need a vote on something, right?
Yeah, we would, I guess if there are no other questions, we would, looking for a a motion to adopt the following resolution, which I will read for the record. It is resolved that the terms and conditions of the attached letter of intent dated June 20, 2013, which we've described and which you all have a copy of, related to the purchase by the town of the Russell property are hereby approved, that the town attorney is authorized and directed to work out the details of a definitive purchase and sale agreement with representatives of the Russells, incorporating the terms of the letter of intent and such other provisions customarily in contracts of this type, and that on behalf of the town, the mayor is authorized to execute the agreement in the form as recommended by the town attorney after that work is done.
Mr. Nixon, I know you've approached the podium. Did you have something else you wanted to say at this time?
No, representative of the Russells, he's here tonight if you have any questions of him. They have agreed to this.
Well, Art, do you want to say anything?
Mr. Nixon's correct. We have Arthur Seymour Jr., Mayor and Alderman, 550 Main Avenue, Knoxville, Tennessee, attorney for Charlie Russell and Ann Owens. Our clients have agreed to the letter of intent that Tom and I have discussed on several occasions and are prepared to move forward on the contract, assuming you all approve this tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I will move for approval to proceed with the letter of intent.
I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now we move to ordinances, and these are second reading, I guess, right? First one is Ordinance 13-18, ordinance to amend the Farragut zoning ordinance, Chapter 4, Section 8, Farragut municipal flood damage prevention regulations to adopt the latest flood study of Turkey Creek and North Fork Turkey Creek and to update the regulations accordingly.
We went in pretty great detail at the last meeting with regards to this. This is the second reading of this ordinance. And the amendment is needed in order to adopt the latest flood study of Turkey Creek and North Fork Turkey Creek to update our floodplain management ordinance and that the town will remain compliant with the National Flood Insurance Program. The National Flood Insurance Program was created in 1968 that allows citizens to participate in participating communities to purchase flood insurance. So meaning that if a community does not adopt floodplain regulations, people cannot get flood insurance. The three components of the NFIP is flood insurance, floodplain management, and flood hazard mapping. Obviously, from a resident standpoint or a business standpoint, being able to obtain flood insurance is the biggest issue, but from the town's perspective, it's more of the floodplain management aspect of things. As I pointed out the last time during the first reading, the most significant change to this ordinance from what we currently have is that the staff and the Planning Commission are recommending that the freeboard be increased from 3 feet to 4 feet. Freeboard is just means a factor of safety. Basically, all of your flood studies are based on calculations, but it can no way take into consideration a blockage of a bridge or culvert opening, greater flood size, or the hydrological effect of urbanization of the watershed. And as I pointed out last time with the when we had the flood study done in with North Fork, Turkey Creek, and Turkey Creek, the base flood elevation increased by 2 to 4 feet, and we were told that in January of 2011, and we were surprised, and then this flood occurred at the end of February in 2011. And you can just see how high the flood waters reach. That's the house that's behind what is now Krispy Kreme. Used to be the Montessori school. And this is in Fox Run subdivision. With the Bigger Waters Flood Insurance Reform Act of 2012, it is now required that the NFIP raise the rates to reflect true flood hazard. So even if a structure is built to comply with everything, if later flood studies show that it is at risk, those insurance rates are not subsidized. So increasing the freeboard from 3 feet to 4 feet is really an inexpensive way for an additional insurance policy for property owners. The staff is recommending approval of Ordinance 13-18, and the Planning Commission recommended unanimously in favor of Ordinance 13-18.
Do we know of anyone who is adversely affected by this?
I'm not exactly sure. Can you define adversely? Because the water's going to be there whether we adopt this or not, so I guess I'm define adversely.
Well, in a negative fashion, or that will cause them financial harm in any way?
No, the intent is actually to prevent financial harm.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Next one is Ordinance 13-19, the fiscal year 2014 budget.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a lot of good discussion at our first reading of the budget at our last meeting. Wanted to talk to you about a few of the changes that we have undergone between first and second reading. They were minimal until tonight's vote on the Russell House and how that CIP needs to go forward. So we will discuss both those issues here in a minute. I wanted to talk to you again, just reiterate our revenues. Those have not changed. None of our assumptions have changed on revenues. We anticipate for the proposed FY 13-14 budget to receive $8,125,547 in revenues. Our expenditures, though, we did have a few adjustments to those. Those are in Attachment A in your board report. For three of the areas, all deal with the cost to minimum changes that we discussed at our last meeting of having a 5% range movement in our personnel ranges. Those are small changes in administration, in information technology department, and also in the public works department. Also, we added an additional $4,500 this year for our wellness program. We're really trying to get that kicked off this year and really get our employees involved. And so that's an additional expense for that program. Total additional cost to the budget this year would be $13,283. So that moves our expenditures up to $6,198,802 for FY14. If we take a look at our CIP, go to the alternate. We originally we talked about, originally we did not have the Russell House included in the CIP. Based on the board's vote just a little while ago to work on purchasing the home, we have included the Russell House as well as the purchase of the Russell House as well as the Russell site improvements to this CIP. You can see those in FY14 through FY17. What impact that has, as we discussed earlier, is to move McPhee Park Phase 3 construction out 1 year from where we originally had it scheduled to FY16 for design and FY17 for construction. Obviously, if we get additional revenues over the next 2 or 3 years that we're able to increase or expand those CIP revenues, that we may be able to do McPhee Park a year earlier, we'll certainly be looking at that and giving the board as much guidance as we can on that, but we certainly don't know what the future holds either. So again, the CIP is balanced, and if the board would, I would ask that you approve on second reading the FY14 budget with the alternative CIP that has just been introduced to the board. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
I will move for approval, the budget with the alternate CIP.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Town Administrator's Report.
Mayor, just had a couple of big events that are going to be coming up next week that I wanted to make sure everybody in the audience and at home is aware of. We talked about this at our beer board meeting before this meeting. The Red, White, and Blues Festival is going to be next Wednesday night at 6:30 out at the open field next to the Farragut Press. We're really looking forward to that. The Farragut Business Alliance is putting that on, and it's always a great event over the last 3 or 4 years. This is the 4th year that we'll be having that. The next day is our annual Independence Day Parade, huge event along Kingston Pike. The event starts at 9:30. You better get there a little earlier than that if you want to get a chair on the sidelines and be able to pull up and park somewhere. So again, we've got, I think, over 95 entries, Sue. Is that 95 entries this year in the parade? It's been full for a while, and we've got a waiting list in case anybody wants to drop out. But again, a great event, and we're certainly looking forward to having fun out there that day. That's all I have to report tonight.
Attorney's report.
No report tonight.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
See you. Have a great 4th.
Yeah.
So it has historical value anyway.
Are you saying you're historical?
No.
He's just old.
We started the public works in the garage
He's just old.
of the dairy barn.
Where the dog.
Yeah, I remember buying
kennel is?
permits over there.
Oh, sure.